I thought attending my college reunion would be fun. Instead, my ex-boyfriend humiliated me in front of everyone, calling me a gold digger who married for money. He had no idea who my husband really was. What happened next? Let's just say karma works faster than you think. Before we dive into this story, if you love dramatic, real-life tales where karma strikes back hard, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Now, let me tell you what happened that night. My name is Mary, and I'm what most people would call ordinary. I work as a librarian at the city's public library, and honestly, I love it. There's something peaceful about being surrounded by books all day, helping people find stories that'll change their lives. My life is simple, quiet, and exactly what I always wanted. Well, almost exactly what I always wanted. 2 years ago, everything changed when I met Daniel. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was at my favorite bookstore browsing through the mystery section. I reached for an old detective novel at the same time as someone else, and our hands touched. I looked up, and there he was, tall, kind eyes, with this gentle smile that made my heart skip. We laughed about it, started talking about books, and 3 hours later, we were still sitting in that bookstore cafe discussing our favorite authors. Daniel was different from anyone I'd ever met. He was quiet, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He didn't try to impress me with fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. Our first date was a picnic in the park. Our second was a visit to a used bookstore. He drove a regular sedan, wore simple clothes, and lived in a modest apartment downtown. He told me he worked in business management, which sounded boring but stable, and that was fine with me. I wasn't looking for excitement or luxury. I was looking for someone real. We got married a year later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. It was perfect, simple, meaningful, and full of love. Daniel never talked much about his work, and I never pushed. He seemed happy. We were happy, and that was all that mattered to me. I had no idea that my quiet, humble husband was hiding the biggest secret of his life. Everything was going smoothly until 3 weeks ago when I received an invitation in the mail, my 10-year college reunion. I stared at that cream-colored card for a long time, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. I hadn't seen most of those people in a decade, and part of me wondered if going back was a good idea. There was one person in particular I wasn't sure I wanted to see again. Brandon. Just thinking his name made my stomach turn. Brandon was my college boyfriend. We dated for 3 years, and I thought we were going to spend our lives together. He was charming, ambitious, and always talking about his big plans for the future. But in our senior year, everything fell apart. He met someone at a business networking event, a girl whose father owned a chain of hotels. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough anymore. He sat me down one evening and told me I was too ordinary, that I had no real ambition, and that he needed someone who matched his vision for success. He left me heartbroken and humiliated. When I showed Daniel the invitation, he saw the worry on my face. He put down his book, took my hand, and asked me what was wrong. I told him everything about Brandon, about how he made me feel worthless. Daniel listened quietly, then said something that surprised me. He said we should go together. He wanted to be there with me, to support me, and to show me that I had nothing to be ashamed of. His confidence gave me courage, so I RSVP'd yes +1. The reunion was held at the Grand Heritage Hotel, one of those fancy places with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. When Daniel and I walked into the lobby, I felt a little out of place. Everyone looked so polished and successful. I wore a red dress I'd bought on sale, and Daniel wore his simple gray suit, the one he wore to family dinners. We looked nice, but not flashy, not like we were trying to impress anyone. My old friends spotted me right away, and there were hugs and squeals of excitement. They asked about my life, my job, and then I introduced Daniel. He shook hands politely, made small talk, but mostly stayed quiet beside me. That's just who he is. He doesn't need to be the center of attention. I loved that about him. We made our way to the ballroom where the main event was being held, and that's when I saw him. Brandon. He looked exactly the same, except now he wore an expensive watch that he kept flashing around, and his hair was styled with way too much gel. Beside him was a woman dripping in designer labels. Her purse probably cost more than my monthly salary. That must be Jessica, his wife. I'd heard through mutual friends that he married someone wealthy and now ran a car dealership that was doing pretty well. He looked happy, confident, and completely full of himself. It didn't take long before Brandon noticed me. His eyes lit up with recognition, and he made his way over with Jessica trailing behind. He had this fake friendly smile plastered on his face as he approached. "Well, well, if it isn't Mary," he said loudly, drawing attention from people nearby. "Still working at the library?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, I love it there. Brandon, this is my husband, Daniel." Daniel extended his hand politely. Brandon shook it but looked him up and down like he was evaluating a used car. I could see the judgment in his eyes, taking in Daniel's simple suit and quiet demeanor. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." "So, what do you do?" Brandon asked with barely concealed condescension. "I work in business management," Daniel replied calmly. Brandon smirked. "Oh, that's nice. Simple and steady, right? Nothing wrong with that." The way he said it made it sound like an insult. Jessica giggled beside him, covering her mouth with her manicured hand. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Daniel just smiled politely and squeezed my hand. He didn't seem bothered at all. We excused ourselves and found our table, but I could feel Brandon's eyes on us throughout the evening. Dinner was served, and everything seemed to be going okay until Brandon had a few glasses of wine. That's when things took a turn. He stood up suddenly, tapping his glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. My heart sank. I knew that look on his face. He was about to say something. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon announced, his words slightly slurred, "I'd like to make a toast." Everyone turned to look at him. It's amazing to see how far we've all come in 10 years. Some of us built empires, some of us married into money, and some of us kept things simple. He looked directly at me and Daniel. My face went hot. People started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "Take Mary here, for example," he continued, pointing his glass at me. "Still working at the library, married to, a business manager? Some people are just happy with the simple life, I guess. Not everyone can be ambitious, right?" A few nervous laughs echoed around the room. Jessica was grinning like this was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I wanted to disappear. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, and I looked down at my plate, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "Brandon, maybe you should sit down," one of our old classmates suggested quietly. But Brandon wasn't done. Someone at another table mentioned Daniel's last name, Cooper, trying to change the subject, but Brandon either didn't hear it properly or didn't care. "Oh, let me guess," Brandon said, walking closer to our table. "Did Mary finally land herself a meal ticket? Is that it? Found someone with a little bit of money and decided to cash in?" He laughed cruelly. "Come on, Mary, we all know you were never the ambitious type. Makes sense you'd marry for money instead." The word hung in the air like poison. "Gold digger." He just called me a gold digger in front of everyone I knew. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I couldn't hold them back anymore. I started to stand up, ready to leave, but Daniel's hand caught mine. Brandon kept going, emboldened by the alcohol and his own arrogance. "I mean, look at that suit," he said, gesturing at Daniel dismissively. "What did that cost? $200? And you married him, Mary? Really? I guess I was right about you after all. No ambition whatsoever." Jessica was practically cackling now. The entire room had gone silent except for their laughter. I'd never felt so humiliated in my entire life. But then Daniel stood up, slowly, calmly, like he had all the time in the world. "Brandon," Daniel said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, "I think you should apologize to my wife." Brandon turned to face him, swaying slightly. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, nobody? You gonna fight me in your cheap suit?" Daniel took a step closer. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Apologize to my wife now." Brandon stepped into Daniel's personal space, getting right up in his face. "Make me." he sneered. "You're nothing. You're a nobody married to a girl who couldn't do any better. So why don't you sit down and accept your place?" What happened next happened so fast I almost didn't process it. Daniel's hand moved in a blur, and suddenly there was a sharp crack that echoed through the entire ballroom. Daniel had slapped Brandon across the face. Not a punch, not aggressive violence, but a controlled, deliberate slap that sent Brandon stumbling backward into a chair. The entire room gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Brandon held his reddening cheek, his eyes wide with shock and rage. "How dare you!" Brandon shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you know who I am? I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you." Daniel stood perfectly still, his expression unchanged. "I know exactly who you are," he said quietly. "You're a small man with an even smaller character, and you will not speak to my wife that way." That's when the hotel manager came rushing over, probably alerted by the commotion. He was a thin man in an expensive suit, looking panicked about the disturbance. But when he saw Daniel, he stopped dead in his tracks. His face went pale. "Mr. Cooper," the manager said, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't realize you were here this evening. Is everything all right?" Brandon froze. "Cooper? What do you mean, Cooper?" The manager looked confused by Brandon's confusion. "This is Daniel Cooper, sir. He owns this hotel. He owns the entire Heritage Hotel chain, actually." I watched Brandon's face change colors like a chameleon. White, then red, then white again. One of our old classmates had pulled out her phone and was frantically typing. She turned her screen around to show Brandon. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Daniel Cooper, net worth over $3 billion, one of the country's youngest billionaires. He owns hotels, tech companies, real estate all over the world. He's famous for keeping his personal life completely private." The phone was passed around. People were staring at the Forbes article with Daniel's picture, then looking at my quiet, humble husband standing there in his simple gray suit. The same man who took me on picnic dates and browsed used bookstores with me. The same man who never once mentioned he was a billionaire. Brandon's knees looked like they might give out. I had no idea," he stammered. His arrogance had evaporated completely, replaced by pure terror. "Mr. Cooper, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were. If you had known, you would have treated my wife with respect," Daniel interrupted, his voice cold. "So you only respect people based on their money? That tells me everything I need to know about you." He turned to the hotel manager. "Please have security escort Mr. Brandon and his wife out of the hotel. They're no longer welcome here." "Wait! No, please!" Brandon begged, his voice rising in panic. "I'm sorry. Mary, I'm so sorry. I was drunk, I didn't mean it." But Daniel had already turned away, putting his arm around my shoulders. 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere, taking both Brandon and Jessica by their arms. Jessica looked absolutely mortified, her face buried in her hands as they were led toward the exit. Brandon was still pleading, apologizing, promising he didn't mean any of it, but his voice faded as they were removed from the ballroom. The room remained dead silent for a moment. Then, slowly, conversations started up again, hushed and shocked. Several of my old friends rushed over to apologize for not defending me earlier. They surrounded us, suddenly treating Daniel with a respect that bordered on reverence, but he deflected it all gracefully. "I think we've had enough excitement for one evening," Daniel said softly to me. "Would you like to leave?" I nodded, unable to find words. We said our goodbyes and walked through the hotel lobby toward the exit. I was numb, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. We got into the car and Daniel started driving. We were halfway home before I finally found my voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. "About the money, about who you really are." Daniel was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road. "Because when I met you in that bookstore, you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a business opportunity, not a status symbol, just me. Do you know how rare that is?" He glanced over at me, his eyes soft. You fell in love with who I am, not what I have. That's worth more than all the money in the world, Mary. I never told you because I never wanted that to change. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they weren't from humiliation. I still would have loved you, I whispered. Money or no money. I know, he said, reaching over to take my hand. That's exactly why I love you. The next week, I heard through the grapevine what happened to Brandon. His car dealership was struggling with debt, something I hadn't known. When word got out about how he'd behaved at the reunion, his reputation took a serious hit. Jessica filed for divorce 3 days later, apparently embarrassed by the whole incident and tired of his true colors showing through. Brandon tried to reach out to apologize again, sending messages through old friends, but I blocked his number. I had nothing to say to him. Daniel and I decided to make an anonymous donation to my college library, enough to build a new wing. We also set up a scholarship fund for students who came from ordinary backgrounds, students like me who just wanted a simple, meaningful life. Daniel said that education and kindness were the best investments anyone could make. As I sit here now, thinking back on that night, I realize something important. Brandon spent his whole life chasing success, measuring worth by money and status. He threw away real love for the appearance of wealth. But me, I found something infinitely more valuable. I found a partner who loved me for exactly who I am, someone who didn't need to brag or show off, someone whose quiet strength spoke louder than any expensive watch or designer label ever could. The slap heard around that ballroom wasn't just about defending my honor, though it was that too. It was a statement that real character doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need validation or recognition. It simply exists, steady and true, like Daniel reading beside me every evening or holding my hand during bookstore visits. I'm still a librarian. I still drive my regular car and shop for dresses on sale. And Daniel still wears his simple gray suit to family dinners. Nothing about our daily life changed after that night, except maybe I appreciate it even more now. We have everything we need, we have each other, and that's worth more than all the billions in the world. Sometimes karma doesn't wait. Sometimes it shows up in a gray suit and defends your honor when you need it most. And that's how my husband defended my honor in the most unexpected way. He didn't need to brag about his success. He let his actions speak louder than words. If this story taught me anything, it's that real love and respect matter more than money or status. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe for more true tales, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me what would you have done in this situation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.